Welcome to the MYD Show. I am Kirsty Watermeyer and I'm delighted to be welcoming you to a brand new episode in a brand new week in our theme where we're looking at love and knowledge. I'm absolutely delighted as well to be joined now in studio by Meunajo Tjiroze, an incredible woman with an incredible story and working in the office of the First Lady representing. Welcome. Tell us who you are, where you were born, and how you got to be who you are today.
My journey is not different from so many Namibians in our country. And it started off, I was born in a refugee camp in Botswana. I grew up there, so those were my very formative years. They always say the first 1,000 days are very important in a child's development. So I grew up in a refugee camp, and at the age of 6, we moved back right before independence. And this was very challenging to me because I only spoke Setswana when we moved back. And you know, it was the beginning of integration. So I started going to public schools because my parents really wanted me to get an opportunity for education. And so in the space, I got admission to Tjiroze Primary School, which was at the time a predominantly white school. So there were probably a handful of black students or other students that were admitted into the school, and there I faced quite a bit of bullying. I remember quite vividly a little girl asking me, of course I was a little girl myself, but she was asking me in Afrikaans, "Hoekom lyk jou hare so snaaks?" So it's to say, why does your hair look so funny? And I couldn't comprehend what that meant. I couldn't comprehend that I was other. And this kind of extended because I grew up in Katutura, so it extended to my community in Herero location because I didn't really quite speak Herero. I was just learning English and Afrikaans because of the requirements at school. And so I always kind of felt very other and didn't really have a sense of belonging in either at school or the community I grew up with.
And I'm sure there was that really stark contrast because from the refugee camp, there's such a sense of community and everybody is one family. So to come to a space where you don't quite fit in and your otherness is being pointed out to you all the time, I'm sure that made it so much harder.
Yeah. So it made assimilating very difficult because language is such an important thing. Yeah. So even within that community, I found it difficult to assimilate. And at some point, I had to really beg my parents to take me out of the school. And so I got placed in a school that was a little bit more diverse. And there I kind of started finding my own way. I think being othered really helped me to know how to adapt and to also have an understanding that we are all similar, you know, because I was so different. I had to kind of figure out similarities between the people I interacted with. And so I had a broad range of interests and that helped me to kind of feel a certain sense of fitting in, but internally I never really quite felt that sense of being settled and fitting in and so on. So it was always a very delicate balance for me growing up. I think the teachers that I was around and just having other people accept me, fellow learners, whether it was just 1 or 2 people in my class, I think that was truly transformative because it allowed me to have the space to kind of explore who I truly am. It allowed me to kind of push into spaces where I didn't quite feel comfortable. So a lot of it was really allowing myself to push into discomfort a lot of the time, because I think sometimes we shy away from discomfort, but I would do things like participating in plays at school or volunteering to do like a Bible study or scripture reading at assembly. And so these were things that, if you look at my personality, would have seemed very atypical, but I knew that, you know, I needed to do that. There was kind of a push towards doing that because I think one of the things that was reinforced when I was younger was being of service. And so even with my faith, that was something that was important. So that really pushed me a lot to to kind of be in spaces that made me feel uncomfortable, like, you know, like I say, speaking in public and so on.
Yeah, which would have ultimately helped you to grow as an individual.
Yes,
but it's fascinating how life and how, when you look at everyone's stories, even the difficult things are things that are kind of asking something of you. They're calling on something of you. And without maybe also that experience and having that, having a look at what othering is all about, to really say, well, who am I going to be in this? It, you know, that's the next evolution of who you've become, which is really beautiful, actually. Even the difficulties bring benefits ultimately.
Yeah, and it's about perspective too, right? Shifting and being able to see things from another perspective, being able to see challenges as an opportunity. I mean, a lot of great thinkers always speak about that. Viktor Frankl was very famous for speaking about that. He spoke about, you know, his experiences in Auschwitz and how he used that as an opportunity to grow personally and to get an insight in terms of why people do the things they do. So yeah, perspective is such an important thing.
Absolutely. If anybody is watching right now that is going through a similar situation where they're on the receiving end of being bullied, what would your message be to them?
Yeah, I think the message is always to understand that that is someone else's projection. You know, it's their own insecurities, that we're all different, and that should be celebrated, and you should celebrate your own difference even if others don't. And it is a very difficult thing, but also to know that nothing is forever. You know, everything has a beginning and it has an end, and it will end. And just to allow also the positive messages that come to you, because sometimes we're very selective about the, you know, our parents might be very positive about us and say good things, but if people at school are not reinforcing that, then we focus on the negative voices instead of feeding that positive. So there's an Indian saying, or a Native American saying that goes, there are two wolves inside of you. The one is the darkness and the other one is light, and you're the one who chooses which is going to win the battle, depending on which one you feed. So feed on positivity, feed on who others say you are in a positive light, and just allow that to kind of guide you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that saying so much. And it's one, since I heard it, I also applied in my own life often, you know, when you're going through difficulties, and I notice myself feeding the negative, and it's a conscious choice then to say, hold on a second, whatever I feed is going to be the one that wins. So I'm going to look at what I want to feed right now, right? Let's talk a little bit about your career path, because it's such an interesting story. But it started off where you were doing pre-med, and this was not necessarily the place where you wanted to be. And so you found psychology. Tell us about this story about finding your path and your passion, because ultimately psychology wasn't where you ended up, but it was something that sparked inside of you. Share with us.
I think this is a common challenge for a lot of university students. We don't really speak about career guidance. I mean, you do a few exposures, whether at a career fair, you might do a psychometric test to help guide you, but ultimately it's always such a difficult decision to make. And my parents never really forced it upon me, or, you know, prescribed that I should study that. It was just a sense of not wanting to let others down. And I think as women especially, we are socialized in a way where you're kind of wanting to make sure that you make everyone else happy, even though they don't articulate expectation. We always enforce expectations.
We feel it.
So I kind of put this expectation on myself, wanting to ensure that my family has a bridge, you know, economically, that they have a bridge to opportunity. And so I thought being a medical doctor was the best way to do that. And so I entered the pre-med process, and I was terrible at math. At the time, and I'm not a math whiz even to this day, but it was always something that I didn't find resonance in. It never, I mean, I remember one moment when I was in an animal biology class and we were looking at cells underneath microscopes, and I just remember feeling such a sense of just feeling numb, not really understanding where I was going with my life. And there was a sense, during that time, there was a sense of depression, and I felt that it was a very difficult time in my life. And I would mask this, right? So when I would go home, you know, I would pretend I was okay, but inside I was really struggling. And so at some point I took up psychology as another major. And there I just felt I would look forward to going to classes. I would look forward to understanding how does the human psyche function. It really felt as though I was finding some kind of meaning or some kind of path. And so that's kind of how I was gently nudged towards psychology through various sets of even failures, right? Like failing math 1A or 1B or whatever it was at the time. So failure can be a way that we can get stepping stones towards, what's possible, towards what our path is.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. And it's incredible because there's a beautiful story in there too, that number one, because you feel it feels good when you're in the right place. And so when you follow that feeling of goodness, you're on the right path. But also that when you're not, that it is very often associated with a form of depression. And I've heard that so many times before on the MYD show where people are not necessarily in the space that they should be and they feel depressed because of it. It's also like a message. It's trying to say to you, this isn't the right way. So let me give you some guidance. But also so often we would see depression as a form of failure, as though now I have mental illness and there's something wrong with me. But it could just be your guidance system. We're going to take a short break and we're going to come back in just a moment and hear some more about where it is that you took psychology to. So do stay with us. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to the MYD Show. I am Kirsty Watermere and I'm sitting down with Meunajo Tjiroze, who's sharing with us on her incredible life journey. And just a moment before the break, we were hearing about how you found your passion when you came into the field of psychology, and that you also knew that you always wanted to work with marginalized communities. So I believe then that you were volunteering while you were studying at the Correctional Services. Tell us about that.
Okay, so I was actually working at a non-profit before, whilst doing my graduate studies in clinical psychology. And then I transitioned to the Correctional Service. And I've always, like I say previously, always had a sense, and I grew up being reinforced in me that service was important. And especially growing up with the background, I grew up being in a refugee camp, seeing how my mother especially got opportunities, that people provided some kind of transitional bridge for her to be able to have access to opportunities like, secretarial work at a church office and so on. So that was kind of the example I had seen, how other people also gave a lending hand. And so that's kind of always been entrenched within me. So as I was working at the nonprofit, like I said, I got the opportunity to work at the Correctional Service, and a lot of people were asking me, oh my goodness, you're such a tiny little woman, what are you going to be doing in that space? Aren't you afraid of working with those guys? Because there was kind of a perception about, and I think there still exists a perception about people who end up in prisons and so on. So I took the opportunity. I felt that it was also an opportunity for me to get to work with people who no one else wants to work with. Not even families. Sometimes they often reject these individuals because they have committed such atrocious offenses towards others that have left a lot of deep trauma in others. And so I thought, and I've always believed, and this is something that's reinforced by Desmond Tutu, is when you treat someone as subhuman, then they don't see the possibility to change, and they don't see the moral responsibility they have to what they've done. So it was always kind of with the aim of wanting to ensure that people have a possibility to change.
Absolutely.
And so it was really such an incredible opportunity for me to work within the Correctional Service. It was a challenging time because I think the Correctional Service was also going through a transition. The system that had existed before then was the apartheid kind of very punitive way of conducting rehabilitation, or rehabilitation was non-existent. And so the former general at the time Everest Shikongo, General Shikongo, made the decision that, you know, there has to be change, there has to be a transformation in the correctional service. And so he started that off by hiring quite a few people with backgrounds in social work and psychology. And a lot of resources were invested in ensuring that people have a possibility for change.
Which is so wonderful. And right now we're of the most forerunning when it comes to our correctional services, because of the fact that we look at rehabilitation, which perhaps you could explain. You know, for anybody that's misunderstanding what the purpose of rehabilitation, why is it that we would need a rehabilitative approach in correctional services? I mean, there are people who would assume you've done a horrible offense, so we would throw you away. What is that going to do to society, that sort of approach? And why should we go rehabilitative?
Yeah, because essentially people who are sentenced for a determined period of time, and they're going to rejoin society, they're going to rejoin our family systems. And so we have to make sure that we offer them, we target the risks. So those things that led to their offenses, whether it was a problematic pattern of thinking, because a lot happens within our thinking patterns. A lot of entrenched problematic beliefs lead to actions that are either violent or present some kind of consequence to society. And so if we don't address these challenges through rehabilitation, and rehabilitation is a very targeted approach, especially how the Correctional Service in Namibia does it. It's evidence-based, so it's shown to work, it's proven to work in other settings across the globe. And so we are trying to apply these methods to look at how can we decrease the risk that people present, how can we address these problematic mindsets, how can we address risk factors. So you'll find someone who engages in stock theft. I had a conversation with a gentleman, he was in his mid-50s, and he was saying to me, I stole this goat because I just wanted meat. You know, I was tired of having pup every day. And so he was trying to have a diet that had some other nutritional input into it. And so we tried to look at creating vocational skills, educational skills that a lot of times, unfortunately, people do not have access to outside of correctional facilities. And for the first time, they're able to acquire skill. And this gentleman was an example where he may not have understood the consequences to that farmer, to others around him, but we're able to kind of make sure that he knows the moral responsibility that he has. And he did apologize to the person that he wronged. And so we're also trying to bring a lot of restorative justice to link people up to the people that they've wronged. And you'd be surprised at the immense remorse that a lot of offenders sit with because of what they've done. Of course, you'll find a very small proportion of the population that will be callous about their actions, not care, but that's because of deeply entrenched mental health conditions such as psychopathy. And so that is a small proportion. And so the sentences there are longer to allow for the possibility, to give that person a possibility for change if they want to make use of it. And often some of them don't, and that is a choice that they make. But there are many who are willing to make a change. I think they really appreciate when someone reaches out, when someone recognizes the humanity in them.
Exactly, because these are human beings.
Yes.
And ultimately, the person doesn't want to do damage. It's damage that creates for more damage. And it's so wonderful that we have a correctional services facility that looks at things like vocations, because I've had on the show before an incredible man who was wrongly accused of a crime and spent time in jail, but he learned a skill while he was there. And when he left, where he works now, he gets Employee of the Month every single month, and he has since the day he started, which was over 10 years ago. Every single month he wins. So there's, very often we're so quick to judge, but we're not looking at the entire circumstance and what would drive somebody to this place, because it's damage that creates more damage.
Yes. As much as we have nuanced experiences, I mean, we always are very quick to have people understand why we took a particular decision, or, why we caused hurt to someone else. We want people to understand the nuance that was involved, but we are not willing to understand the nuances of others. And it is really, a lot of parenting issues, lack of parental involvement really has a detrimental effect on young people, and they grow up to be men and women who unfortunately hurt others.
Absolutely. We're going to be back in just a moment because we're going to be talking in just a moment about the very important campaign that's being run through the Office of the First Lady. So do stay with us. We'll be back after this. Welcome back to the MYD Show with Kirsty Watermere and Meunajo Tjiroze, who's sharing with us on her journey, incredible journey to where she is today. And we're just about to get to the part where you joined the Office of the First Lady. Tell us about that and the work that you're doing right now.
Yeah. So I continue to have these incredible opportunities. I'm not quite sure how they come about, because I think there's nothing particularly unique about me. I think I've just had incredible opportunities in life.
And you've made good use of them. I think there's lots unique about you. Just saying, just adding that in. I think you're fantastic.
Thank you. And so I've had this opportunity within the Office of the First Lady. I started five months ago. And so it was, I'm the technical director within the office, and the work that we're doing is really currently something that I've always wanted to do. I worked in the treatment space, whether it's working with women who were abused or working with men who have themselves been abused and became abusers. And so now I get the opportunity to work on the prevention side. So how can we ensure that individuals don't end up following a path where they're either exposed to abuse or they themselves become abusers? And so an anti-violence campaign was birthed from a lot of the work that the office was doing around GBV, with the understanding that someone who would abuse their partner or be violent towards their partner is likely to be violent towards their brother, their sister, their mother, their child. And so gender-based violence really thrives within the generally high levels of violence in our community, and especially these days we hear so many newspaper headlines of people whose lives were taken in a senseless act of violence. And so the campaign really aims to bring awareness around different forms of violence, and also to have us internalize the fact that we can be agents of change when it comes to the prevention of violence.
Exactly.
That violence prevention isn't just something out there that the police needs to take care of or someone external needs to take care of, but that we can be part of the change. And so at the end of the campaign, we want to come up with 10 big ideas around violence, whether it's data collection or even encouraging people to report violence. And we want to come up with 100 interventions. So these are really practical approaches. So in Havana, what can we do practically on the ground to ensure that children don't grow up and commit violent offenses or themselves become victims of violence? So what are those things that we can do to engage communities, to engage people in different spheres of life, to ensure that they add towards violence prevention and really to reduce the levels of violence that we're going to see in 10 or 20 years.
Exactly.
And we need to start doing the work right now.
You're 100% correct. I agree with you so much. We do need to start the work right now. So tell us, the campaign is Break Free to Be Free. How can people get involved? Where do they go to join in?
Yes. So this is something that we want. I mean, it was launched by the Office of the First Lady, but we really want communities to take ownership of this. And so one of the things that you can do is follow us on our different social media platforms. Just search for Break Free, Be Free, Anti-Violence. And we also have this incredible initiative, which is 100,000 pledge signatures. So we have a pledge where we're asking people to commit to 12 behaviors which would promote non-violence in our communities, whether it's when someone tells you that they've been a victim of violence, believe them, or as parents we should teach our children ways of resolving conflict without resorting to violence. And so we're asking people to get in touch with us through our social media platforms and sign the pledge, stand together with us to say, get the message clear out there that violence is not a normed behavior in our society. It's not normal. This is not who we are as Namibians. This is not an identity that we're willing to have settle in and become part of how we see ourselves or how we see others around us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So get involved and sign the petition. I certainly have.
Yes.
Meunajo, it's been so wonderful having you in studio. You've really inspired us. Before we wrap up though, let's hear from you. Who you would say has inspired you? And with that, what your message would be with that inspiration to other Namibians as to how we can really hold hands and support one another.
Yeah. I think I've been inspired by so many people, whether it was someone coming into a counseling setting or someone, whether it was a cleaner but Maya Angelou has been an incredible inspiration to me. But my mother, more especially, has been very inspirational to me. I think two of the things that she's always said to me is, be good. Yeah. So that means service, right? We should seek to serve others, and then also be yourself. Right? So despite maybe feeling as though you're in the margins or you don't quite fit in, the important thing is to be yourself. Find that space within yourself that you can occupy, and occupy it authentically, because that gives others permission to do the same, to be who they truly are.
Absolutely
and
beautiful.
We can only do good if we are truly ourselves.
Absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming and share those words of wisdom and your incredible story. And we wish you so much success going forward as you continue to work with communities to really help uplift Namibia through conversation and through love, ultimately. Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. It's been wonderful being in your company once again. And until we meet again, from me, Kirsty Watermeyer, remember that it begins and it ends with love, because love is what you are.